Good morning again. Welcome to Reports and Queries in SAP Business One. My name is Mauricio Castrillon. I'm Vice President of Sales and Marketing for Consensus International, and I am joined by Richard Calvo, our lead technical consultant at Consensus, the man who almost knows it all. This webinar is being recorded, and we will send a link to everyone who signed up for the webinar. Please send your questions to the Q&A section button. If you scroll with your button to the lower end of your screen, you will see the pop-up and a button section for the Q&A. So please write your questions in the Q&A section. Otherwise, we will not be able to answer it. We will answer all questions at the end of the webinar, time permitting. In case time does not allow us to answer all questions, we will answer these in the email with the recording sessions in written format. Finally, I want to reiterate that we will do monthly webinars, and we are very interested in your questions, in your suggestions and feedback. So, please let us know what topics are interesting to you. Let's get into the objective of our presentations. Reports and queries in SAP Business One. Queries give you the ability to quickly display data from SAP Business One company database tables. One of the many uses of these queries is to generate ad hoc reports. So this is what we're going to be covering. Display system information for all fields. In other words, where is the information stored in the database so that you can access it or reference it in the queries. You're going to touch on understanding the basic elements of a query for those of you who are not, familiar with this type of queries. We're going to create SQL queries, SQL queries using SAP Business One Query Generator, and we're going to save and manage queries for future use. Finally, we're going to show you how to restrict access to saved queries. So without further ado, let me introduce you to Richard Calvo. Thank you.
Thanks, Mauro. Hi, everyone. My name is Richard Calvo, and I'm on the technical team here at Consensus International. And like Mauricio was saying, today we're going to cover all these topics on screen here. First of all, what's the point of making queries? What are these really used for? Well, they're used for a bunch of things in the system and outside of the system, but one of the major things that you're going to use them for inside of Business One is to customize your alerts, your approval procedures, and your formatted searches. You're also going to use them to create ad hoc reports. So these are any reports that you create that are custom, that don't come with the system, and you can run on demand. You can also use them to validate data when you're doing migration from a legacy system, or maybe you're migrating to another database. You want to make sure that all the records or the pertinent records do exist in both sides. And then lastly, you can use them to create crystal reports. These are the customized and the very pretty print layouts that you can bring out of the system, that you can generate PDFs or print them out and send them to your customers. Okay, so this is the basic composition of the marketing documents inside of Business One. If any of you have been using Business One for at least a month or so, you know that there's a concept called marketing documents. These would be your sales or your purchase documents, and they're all structured in a very similar way. So if you learn how to build a query for one, you will learn how to build a query for most of them. The documents are structured in this header document row header format. That means that the information at the top of the document, when you have the customer or the name or the date, that's header data. Oddly enough, the information at the bottom is also considered header data. It's not called a footer, but it's considered header data because that information doesn't repeat on the document. So you only have one sales employee, one owner. The information on the rows is information that's repeating. It's master data that you put in there that just repeats. So you put in the items, you put in text, you put in calculations, whatever it may be. And those come from different tables. If you look on the left here, there's a general structure that Business One follows for all objects or all marketing documents, and that is that they place an O in front of the header table, and then a 3-letter abbreviation. And then for the rows or any child tables that are related to that document, it's the same 3-letter abbreviation plus a number. In the case of orders, it sounds like an order, so it's ORDR. And then the rows where the items are RDR1. There's also other tables like RDR2, 3, 4 that you can check on your own later. Okay, let's go ahead and move on. So, okay, I know that I want to pull out information from my sales order, but I have no idea how the query should look or what the table is or what the columns are specifically that I'm looking at. I know what they look like on the screen because it says card name or card code or due date, but I don't know which table and which column it is in the background. Well, there's a handy thing on the toolbar of Business One where you have your file, edit, view. There's a little checkbox that you can check that says system information. And when you do that and you mouse over any field on the screen, if you look on the bottom left where you typically receive errors or notification messages from the system, you have a bunch of more information showing up. Now, there's also a shortcut key as indicated here. It's Control-Shift-I, so you don't have to press view. But we'll see that in the demo in the next section here, where we'll enable this functionality. And when we place our mouse over a field, we're able to pinpoint exactly which table name, you can see it highlighted down here in blue, table name and field name that field represents. So let's move on to the Business One system and we'll have a short demo. One moment. Okay, you should now be seeing the Business One screen. And first, we are going to open the Business Partner window here by opening Business Partner. If this screen looks a little unfamiliar to you or it looks different than your screen, that's because there's a SQL version of Business One and a HANA. In this case, I am using what looks to be the SQL version. It is actually HANA, but I've disabled the cockpit, so do not be alarmed. All right. If you look on the bottom left of the screen here, you're going to see that there's a section where you typically receive error messages. And right now, if I put my finger here or my mouse over any of these entries, you can see that it has a bunch of information. Now that's because I've turned on this system information here. So I'm going to turn it off. And when I put my mouse over these fields, the only thing you actually see is the same field name that you already have on screen. Okay. But it also tells you some information like how many characters fit in that field. That's useful to know. If you turn on system information, at the end of that long string of characters, you can see that there's a table, comma, a column name. So all this information coming in the header of the business partner is the table OCRD. That's the customer card, OCRD. And this first column here with the code is card code. This next column is card name. This next column is card F name, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So when you're thinking about a report that you want to build or a query that you want to build to pull out information from the system, the first thing you should do is turn on the system information and start writing down or taking note of what these fields are so you have an idea of what you're going to display in your query later. Okay, so we can close the screen and we'll go back to our presentation in a moment. Okay. So now we need to talk about the basic elements of a SQL query. We might have already in mind that we're going to pull out a query that has all of these fields and we need to display this. And we kind of have an idea of what we want our end result to be and where that data is in the system. But in order to do so, you need to know how to build a SQL query. It might look a little scary if you've never seen it or a little complicated, even if you have seen it before, but it's really not that complicated. And I've highlighted here the different sections of the query for you in orange. I've also put bullet points on the left-hand side that kind of has a little description of what the sections are. So if we go from top to bottom, which is how you would basically start building a query, the select portion, you list the names of those columns or those fields that you want to display in your end result. Your end result is just going to be a table with some rows and some columns in it. That's what you put under select. Now from indicates what the data source is. Now, that data source could be a table like we just saw, like OCRD, for example, or ORDR for the order. It could be a view that somebody has built for you. It could be output from a procedure in the system. Those are more advanced topics, but the basis topic would be a table. You're pulling out columns from a table. The little T0 that you see there highlighted in orange is just an alias so that we don't have to type out ORDR dot the field name for everything because that would make the query really large. If you want to pull information from multiple tables at once, let's say you're pulling information from your sales order, but you need information that's not on the sales order, it's just on the BP master, then you need to link those tables together. And the way you do that is with joins. That's the next highlighted section, a join. How do you join things together? Well, you pick a field that is a key in both tables. So in the order, for example, you only have one business partner. And in the business partner screen, you have one business partner code. So those fields, the codes on both sides, are what joins those tables together. That's how you join and link those tables. The next section is the where, and this is an optional section. This basically filters down the results so you get less results, only those that match your predefined conditions. An optional section that I don't show you in the first query, but it's in the second query, is the group by. And you only need to use this when you have to do calculations in your query. So you might want to pull, like in the second query here, you might want to pull the customer and how many orders they've had in a period of time, and the sum value of the dollar value of all of that for the customer. So it's grouped by customer. Those are the cases where you need to use group by. The next section is sorting, which is the order by that you see there. And that's just so you can sort the records in a particular order. You might want it ascending by date and then descending by document number, for example. And a concept that's specific to Business One are the Business One variables, and that's just placeholders for data. The only reason you'd use that is if you want variable data inside of your query. For example, somebody runs a query and they want to see open documents. So you wouldn't just say open documents. You would say there's a variable and the person chooses open or closed or canceled or whatever the state may be. That's the use of variables. Now, these are the basic building blocks of a query. We touched on what joins are here when you link multiple tables together. I just want to present a little slide real quick with the different types of joins. Don't worry, all of this stuff is available on the internet, and we're also going to provide it to you with the recording of this session. So the most common joins is where you are linking two tables together by a value, and they must exist on both tables. And this is this join that you see on the left. This is the inner join. This is saying both tables must have the same value and only give me back the results where these values match. The left join is different because we will show all of the results from the first table and only the results in the second table that match. The right join is the opposite of that. And then the full join is just a combination of all the records in one table with the combinations of records in another table. Okay, let's move on. If you have any questions, make sure that you're putting them in the QA so we can address them at the end of the session. I know we're moving on kind of quickly here. That's just so we can get through the demos. There are two tools built into Business One that allow you to create queries. You could also create queries outside of Business One. So on the database engine itself, be it SQL or HANA, or in your customizations, your add-ons externally, you could create queries there. But this is a visual way for you to write queries without you having to memorize everything and do it all freehand. So we're actually going to cover both of these in a second. And we are going to start with a query wizard. The benefits of any wizard is that you have a guided process with steps, but the downfall is that you have less control over something that's freehand or in fact, even the query generator in the system here. So let's go ahead. We're going to move on to the demo portion here, and I'm going to swap back to the Business One system. Give me just a minute. Okay, so we're back in our Business One system here, and we're going to go to Tools, Queries, Query Wizard. This is the one we're going to start with. You can read this description here. It's just a wizard that allows you to create queries from tables in the database. So we'll hit next. And the very first part of this wizard is asking us which tables we want to use. So we went before to a document, we turned on system information, we recorded the tables and maybe the field names, and now we're going to start putting the stuff here. So you know SAP has autocomplete on most fields. So if you stand on a field and you press tab, you're going to get a list of available options. We happen to know that we're going to pull out information from the order table. So I would type ORDR, or you can scroll through the list and find the sales order table. And we'll select this. When you're on a selection, on the bottom, the system automatically suggests related tables. These are tables that have keys in order and are related. For example, you know, like we talked about before, the business partner card code in the sales order table has a related field in the business partner table, which is card code. That's just so you can link these together if you need to. For this example, we're going to go ahead and pull information out of our order table only. We press next. We're in the first section here. So actually the previous step was the from section that we talked about earlier. And now this next step is the select section that we talked about earlier as well. This is the one where you define what columns are going to show up. So here you have a list of the tables that you chose previously. When you're in here, you can just hit tab and you'll get a field list. You already got the field somewhere because you checked earlier that you were going to pull out this, this, and that. So let's start building something here. We want to pull out the card name on the order table. Over here, we want to pull out the document number of the order. And over here, we want to pull out the document total of the order. This section here that says heading, this has to do with aliases that we talked about. This is so you can change the display of the field. So instead of the field saying card name, you could change it to customer, or you could change it to something else. So actually, we're going to change this to customer here, okay? And we are going to sort in ascending order by customer. So in the end, what we're trying to display here is a listing that has customer codes or customer names, sorry. And then it has how many orders they've had, and then it has the total dollar value. Okay, so since we're going to do those calculations, those mathematical functions, we need to group by this field here. We actually need to group by any field that is not included in a mathematical function. So we're going to say yes, group by the card name. Here for the document number, we actually just want a total record. So this is a count of how many orders they've had. And here we want this amount. And this amount is really the sum function in SQL. There's many functions, and these are all available in documentation on the internet. It's beyond the scope of this this webinar, but we can have another one later. All right, so we'll hit next here. And then here, we're in the conditions and relations section. This is the where part that we said earlier. The where part helps us to filter out the results. Maybe we don't want 10,000 lines to come back because too much data is not useful data for us. It would be too difficult to sort through all that. So we're going to filter by documents that are not canceled, for example. So we'll hit orders here, and we'll pick out this again. We'll pick out this field canceled. And our condition here is going to be not equal to. So canceled is not equal to the value yes. All right. We're only pulling back orders that are not canceled, whether they're open or closed, but not canceled. And then we're going to hit next. This shows us a preview already of our query. This is the syntax that we talked about earlier. We can see the alias here that we set. We can see this count function that's going to give us a total number of records. We can see the sum that we talked about for the dollar value. We can see the where, which is the filter for documents that are not closed. And we can see where it's pulling that information out, which data source, which is the order table. We can also see that we're sorting by the customer name. So we hit finish. We get our query here in the query preview, and we get our query already run here with results. There's a blank one here because there's documents that have a customer with no name on them. Okay. So this is the example for Query Wizard. You can see you can do some stuff in there, but you don't have a lot of control. So next, we're going to look at the query generator. So I'll just cancel out of here, minimize this query. We'll go back to Tools, Query Generator. The screen is a little different, but it's the same kind of concept where we're going to have a section where we choose the tables. Then it's going to display for us the columns in that table or the fields that we can pick. And it's a little nicer over here because it has the same structure that we talked about in the PowerPoint, where we have a selection area. We have an area where we pick the data source. We have a filter. We have sorting. And then we have the grouping in case we need to use it for mathematical functions. So in this area up here is where we're going to start picking our tables. So we're going to do the same thing. We're going to pick ORDR. If you didn't know what the table name was, you can just hit tab like before. A screen comes up and you choose the table from the list of available tables. Okay. Okay. So now we want to select some values. So all we have to do, these are the possible tables that we can, the possible columns, sorry, that we can select from. We're going to double click these and they'll go to whatever section is highlighted in yellow on the right. So if we're in the selection, double click document number, we'll double click document name, and we'll double click document total. At this point, we can actually run a preview of our query by pressing execute. We'll see the query up here. We'll see the results down here. You can see there's almost 5,000 records. So this seems like a lot of data. Maybe it's not that useful for us. This is like a detailed view instead of in comparison to the summarized view that we just looked at in our previous query. Has a lot of information in here. Okay, so we can close that preview and we can continue adding things to our query. All right. let's say, for example, now I do want to pull out information from the business partner, and that information is unfortunately not available on the order. So we know that the business partner table was OCRD earlier. So we can actually hit here, OCRD, this is the business partner table. And if we choose it, we now have this table in our result set here, and we can see that the system automatically did a best guess and added a join for us and said, we're going to join on the card code and the sales order and join that to the business partner. Okay, so now we have two tables that we can pull out information from, and whichever one you select here changes the columns that are available at the moment. So we'll go back to our selection here, and we're going to add those fields from the business partner that we did not want to pull from the order. So one of them is our card code, our card name, and I want to put out this federal tax ID that's not available on the order. So just double click there. If I hit execute, we're going to get back the same number of records from before because we haven't changed the selection criteria, but we're adding more columns to the display. So you can see here, some of these are coming back with tax IDs. Some of these don't have tax IDs. They could be foreign, or they could be BPs that just were not set up correctly in the system. Okay. We'll close this preview, and we're going to start filtering down this information a little bit, okay? So we'll go back here, and we're going to say we only want documents that are still open. For example, we're building a report for open documents at this state. So we're going to look in our list here, and you can sort this list by double-clicking any of these columns, but the value that I'm looking for is right here. It's doc status. So you can see that it added the doc status here to our where condition, which is what's going to filter, and you can either use the shortcuts here, double clicking these, or type them out. What I mean by that is like you can type out equals for doc status equals something, or you can double click equal and it'll put it in there for you. I'm looking for documents that are only open, and I happen to know that the value for that is O, which means open. So if I click this now, our results went from 4,900 to 4,600. I know you can't see that there, but if I expand, you'll see there's 4,600 results. So we're already filtering down the results. But I'm going to add another filter to this. I want a lot less documents. And I'm only going to look at documents that have happened in a past year from now. So you can see this is a demo database that has documents that are from 2007, 2008, very old documents in the system, and some from 2017. So I only want to display those from 2019, for example. So in order to do that, you have to add a comparison to the document date on the document and use a function. This is a little bit more of an advanced topic, functions. But like I said, these are all available online, and the documentation is pretty easy to read. So this is a HANA system. So for my HANA system, I'm going to say where the document status is opened and the document date. So I'm going to go look for this document date again. So I just double clicked it and it came back onto the screen, and the document date is greater than a particular date. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say, and I'll break this down for you in a second. I'm going to say add days, current date here, minus 365. So what's happening here is we're running this, which is a function in HANA that says get today's date, which is 1/16/2020. And we're going to add some days to that. If we add a negative value, we're going back in time. If we add a positive value, we're going forward in time. And we're going to compare that the doc date of the documents are greater than that date. So if we hit execute here now and we scroll, we can now see that we're only getting 373 results. So this is a lot more manageable. This is what we want. Okay. So you have this preview here from Query Generator, and we're good to go here. We've added this table. We've added this table. You can also see there's some fields in bold. What that means is that let's say, for example, we're going to delete this query from here, right? So we'll hit the X on that table, and that's going to remove it from our results set. It's going to move the stuff from the selection, from the from the where, everything. What that actually means is that you can bring any of these fields that have a bold into here, and it will add the associated table automatically for you. See, so it brought over OCRD again with the card codes here, and then you can go ahead and add these values into your selection again. Okay. All right. So for now, we're done with this section. I'm going to return to the PowerPoint in a moment. Let's just minimize all these query previews that we have here. Make sure we have the one that we want. Okay, these are the two queries that we want. Okay, so until now, we wrote some queries on the screen. We might have written them outside of Business One and just run it on demand outside of Business One. But if we were to log out of Business One right now, or if we were to close our query preview window, we would lose our queries. And then we would have to write them all over again. When you have a big query, it's very difficult to remember all the conditions that you had in there. So that can be a problem. Fortunately, the system allows you to save queries so that you can reuse them later. And this is the basis actually for customizations, because you create a query, you save it, and then you can use it in a customization. Earlier, we talked about things like formatted searches, crystals, all of that. Those are all using saved queries. Now, how the system handles this is you have query categories here. In this example, for example, we have sales, marketing, and purchasing, and you can see individual queries in underneath them in between. Each category of queries that could hold, unlimited amount of queries. Each category has authorization groups that have visibility to the category. If you look on the right-hand side of the screen here, there's a preview of the authorizations in the system, and these authorizations are assigned to the categories. So we have a category, we have one or more groups. There's up to 15 groups of authorizations that can access that category. And then you have individual users or user groups that have permissions to those authorization groups. So it kind of trickles down here. You can see right here, for example, that Sophie and Tim have permission to authorizations group 2 so that they can view these two categories, which both allow permission group 2 to view them. You can see the display here has different examples of how this would work out. So I guess what we can do is on the right-hand side, also I want to mention that these are the minimum permissions that a user needs to be able to execute queries. They need this permission that says execute non-SQL select statement, full authorization. And then one or more of these saved query groups, they must have permission to. Otherwise, they're not going to be able to run queries, which means there's a formatted search on screen and the user doesn't have permission, the formatted search is going to fail for them. So you're going to have failures on individual users. They have to run a report, it's going to fail for them. If they have to run an approval procedure that has a query, it's going to fail for them. So you want to be real careful how you assign these permissions in the system. So let's have a demo. We're going to go back to our Business One system in a moment here. All right, we should be back on the Business One screen. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go, this is an administrative user, it's a super user. And I'm going to go into my query manager. This can also be accessed from here, queries, query manager, just where we had the wizard and the generator before. And I have two groups here, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to set them up from scratch. That way you guys can see it. So I'm going to delete sales by right-clicking and saying delete row. I'm going to delete this administration group that I created earlier. Okay, those are both gone from the system. You can see that my user can see a lot of these groups, and that's just because I'm a super user, so I have permission to all of these groups. But the first thing you need to do is define your groups. In a base system, when you install an empty company, you only have general and system. System already has a bunch of queries predefined for you that SAP delivered. So when you need a customization, you should probably look through the list of system queries first to see if it fulfills what you need. And if it's just a matter of changing some columns, that you can open that, make a copy of that query and save it then with your customizations in it. You won't be able to save on top of the system queries, but you'll be able to save to these other categories that you manage. So let's go to manage categories and we'll add again this sales. Okay, and I'll open it again and administration. I'm just going to hit add here. Okay, perfect. So now if I go back here, I should see sales and administration at the end of my list. And I'm going to say for sales, I want only people with permission group 1 to be able to access all of the queries inside of the category sales. So update that, hit OK. And then for administration, I want people with permission group 2 to be able to view that. So save that, we'll hit OK and click update. We just want to check that those settings took. So I'm going to go in here again. And yes, I can see that's there. And I'll go in here again. And I can see that's there. OK, so we're good to go. Now in my screen, I automatically see sales and administration. That is because I am a super user once again. So we'll pull up our queries that we just had minimized here from before. We have two of them. We have one with detail. which is this one on the left-hand side. This is the one with all the detail, 300 and something rows. And we have the summarization one. It's only got 24 rows. It's by distinct business partner. It's got these records summarized. So this one right here with the detail, I want this under my sales category. And this one over here, I'm going to put under administration. So this one here, I'll be able to view all of them, obviously, but a user that only has access to group 2 or does not have access to group 1 will not be able to see it. Let's go ahead and save. I'll close this window I had before. I'm going to save this under sales, and I'll call this query sales detail, for example, okay? Or sales past year. This is the one for the past year. Sales past year. We'll save this, and I can close this now. And I don't have to worry that that's gone because my query is now under sales. So I can double click and there's my query again running with updated data. So let's close it. Now this one here, I'm going to save under administration and we'll call this sales by BP. I'll save this one under administration. Save. Okay, so like I mentioned before, I'm able to view all these queries, but another user that doesn't have the correct permission is not. So if we go into our authorizations in the system and we go to general authorizations, we'll get the listing of all of the users and all of their permissions. Now these permissions, there's a lot of users in this database, this demo database, but these permissions take from individual user permissions that you set, as well as group permissions. And that's what the effective authorization ends up being. Whichever one is higher, whichever one gives most permissions is the one that's the effective authorization. You can see there's two tabs here, users and groups. So if you define groups, if you assign the permissions to the groups, those will trickle down into the users assigned to those groups. For now, we'll go into here to reports, query generator. This is on the screenshot of the presentation. And we're in this section here where we can see for the particular user called consensus, they only have authorization to this execute non-SQL statement, which I said was a requirement, and to group 2. So they shouldn't be able to see anything under the sales group or any other group, but they should be able to see all of the categories and therefore all of the queries under the groups assigned, under the categories assigned to group 2. So in our case, administration that we just set up. So now we are going to log in as this other user called consensus, and we're going to go to the query manager, and we're going to see that we have access to a bunch of categories that are set to all users, for example, but we will not have access to sales. We will only have access to administration, or we should. Let's see what happens. All right, I'm connected now as my demo user called consensus. If I try to open the query manager, I actually don't have permission to this. And anytime you get a pop-up like this that says permission override, and it's got this bold section here, it's got this authorized by no user, you know that this is a restriction on that user based on authorization. This is not a license restriction. License restrictions show up in the bottom left of the screen in red. So I'm just gonna hit OK. I can still run my queries though by going to tools, queries, user queries. And if I look for sales, it's nowhere on the list. So that's what we'd expect. I don't have permissions to the sales group, but I do have administration. So now I can click sales by BP. And there's my sales by BP. There's the report that we created earlier and assigned to this category. This user also cannot edit. You can see that the little button that's normally here, it's a pencil to edit this query. We cannot do so. So this is just a run only scenario. Okay, so we'll close this out. I will log back into the main user I was using, and we'll go back to our presentation. One moment. Okay, we're back in our presentation and we've actually got some bonus content to show you here. We've been through the list of everything that was on the agenda, but I just want to mention these things here. So your existing queries, you can use them for alerts. The alerts are notifications that are sent to end users either inside of Business One where you get that messages pop up or through email. You can also use them to create formatted searches, which are automations that you create on screen that respond to a user action. For example, a user selects an item and you want to bring back a value like a lead time or something like that. You can have it automatically bring that back via query. You can also use them to create crystal reports, which are those print layouts that we talked about, add-ons, integrations. There's a great book out there called Mastering SQL Queries for SAP Business One. It's written by Gordon Du, who is one of the main contributors on the SAP forums. And I strongly suggest you buy this. It's something like $5 or $10. Okay, so actually let's go into the system and we'll have a quick demo of these formatted searches and alerts. Okay, so we'll swap back into our SAP Business One client here. And I'm going to bring up a sales order. And I'm going to create a new one for our same business partner that we've been working with. I'm just going to put the date as today. I'm going to pick here some items like these two here. And you can see when I picked this item here, there is a particular field on my screen that has a magnifying glass. That means that it has a formatted search applied to it. And the way we know this is because there's a selection here that you can select that says indicators and pickers display. And we want to choose to show fields that have user-defined fields on them. So this field shows this icon. That means it has a user-defined formatted search on it. So if we open that, we get this screen here that says run this query called lead time. If you click open saved query, you'll get the same query manager window from before, and you'll select the query that you've pre-created. And we're saying auto refresh this value whenever we exit the column item number here and show that value in here. So if we go into our query manager real quick and we search for this query called lead time, we'll see that it's under the category of formatted search. And the only thing this query does is select the value lead time, which is in the item master data. We'll show you here real quick. So I'll close this. I'll go to item master data. If you go here to planning, I believe there's a field for lead time. And since we have system information on, if you look on the bottom left of the screen, you'll see it's OITM lead time. So this is a value that we're displaying, OITM lead time. The only thing this query is doing is displaying lead time from OITM, where the item code is a particular value on screen. Now, this is an advanced syntax here. We can send you documentation on this. This syntax basically pulls out the current value on your screen. This section here, this is the repeating section that we talked about earlier, has the listing of items. So the value on the first row is not the same as the value on the second row. We said that the value at the top never changes. Those are unique, but these over here do change, right? So whichever item code we're currently on, it's going to run this query. It's going to bring back the result here if there is a result. For example, this AA02 does not have a lead time. So even if I click this here, nothing's happening. I'm getting nothing back. So that's an example of a formatted search. We're going to add this document. And now we've added a sales order today. So next, let's move on to an alert. You go in here into administration, alerts management, and I've already created an alert earlier. It's called orders added today. So this orders added today, if we go here and look at open saved query again, we can see that it's using the query orders added today, right? If we go in here and we type orders added today, we see it's under the section alerts. So let's actually see what's in that query. If we go in here and we run this, we can see that there's only one order added today. That's the order that we literally just added to the system. Whenever you set up an alert here and it's running from a query, if the query runs and the query has any result, the users indicated in the alert configuration will receive a configuration. Will receive an alert, I'm sorry. So in this case, Richard, which is my own user, is receiving an internal message that this has happened. Now, I would expect this to come through. If it doesn't come through, it's just a configuration problem on my part. But you can see that you have the option here to send it internally through this messages window or through an email, which means that the email configuration on the server has to be correct, and it'll send it to the email defined on the user, Richard. So this is my user here, Richard. So it should send it to this email if I had that enabled. All right, the configuration of the alerts itself here has a frequency on how often you want the system to run this to try to pull back that information. In this case, it's set to every 1 minute, but it could be something where you set it to weeks or months or days. It depends. It's just a report that you receive the notification for. So maybe you want it to set it nightly so that every night this runs and tries to figure out if there were any returns added to the system or any credits or something like that. So this is the configuration for alerts. And as we saw, it also uses the existing queries that you have saved into the system. Go ahead and I'll close that. And that is the end of the presentation. This is the end of the content that we had scheduled for today. I think we can move on to the Q&A section next.
Thank you, Richard. Very well explained. Great job as usual. Thanks for your questions. Also, we have 3 questions. The first one from Jennifer. Is there a table that defines the various statuses for orders, purchase orders, shop orders, etc.? For example, the status of an order can be open, shipped, picked, billed, invoiced, posted, etc. Where can you find all of the available statuses and what they mean?
So that's a great question, Jennifer. This topic is called an enumeration, and it's typically available on the SDK. So the SDK will have enumerations of open, closed, all of those things that you just mentioned. However, there's no table in the system that stores that because the DI API, which is the layer in between what you're interacting with on screen and the database itself, is the one that manages those statuses. So the best thing I can do for you is in a demo database, in a test database, you would add orders in those several different statuses, and you can just run a query real quick where you can see what those statuses end up being. So for example, we'll pull out ORDR here, and we will look for doc status. We'll say this, I'm sorry, my alert is still running in there because I left it enabled there for every 1 minute. So we'll run distinct status on here, and we'll get the different statuses that exist in my system at the current moment. For example, C for closed and O for open.
Thank you, Richard. Fernando asks, can you call the same table of different companies or databases for the same environment? For example, if you have company based 2 or 3 countries, can you see all your clients in a query?
Yes, you can. So you are able to run select queries across multiple databases. It is against the rules to run any manipulation queries. So that means update, insert, delete on any database, including the one that you're at. But you can definitely run it aggregated across multiple databases. In fact, what we typically do when we have to do like that for like intercompany transactions or anything that has to do with summarized data with multiple entities, you create your own database that can be like a holding one, or it can just be a utility database. It doesn't even have to be a Business One database. And in there, you create your queries that then reach across all the different databases to pull back the information that you need.
Thank you. Jennifer also asks, is there a data dictionary available for SAP Business One for the SQL tables?
There is, in fact, it's also included under the pre-mentioned SDK. I can show you what that looks like real quick, but you just have to have the SDK installed on a machine. So if you're still seeing my screen here, you might actually
We're
not be
saying,
able to
are
see.
you sure you want to permanently delete the message?
Yes, just give me one moment, please.
Yes.
So this is the database table reference. It's included with the installation for the SDK. And you can basically just type in here like ORDR or something, and you can sales order, and you can see all the tables here and their statuses as well, like we mentioned earlier here. For example, data source, these are different data sources. Doc status here, you can see open or closed. Inventory, you can see the enumerations, or part of the enumeration. Sometimes this is not as updated as it should be, unfortunately, but there's a lot of information here that you can use to create queries.
Excellent. Ludivine, thanks for your question. It's asked, can you use queries to dynamically value emails, alerts recipients?
I'm not sure what the query is asking. Can you use queries to dynamically value emails, alerts, recipients? When you set up an alert in the system, whatever the values in your query are, so like let's say you have dynamic SQL, which builds the data differently for each run, then the recipient will receive whatever the end product is. So I guess the answer to that question could be yes, but I'm not sure what you're asking. I'm sorry.
Ludivine, if you can send us an email, we'll with a little bit more details. We'll be more than glad to give you a more open answer. Rohan asks, are there any good sources that you recommend to learn a little bit more advanced SQL syntax for conditions?
Sure. If you are looking for specifically Business One information, then that book that I recommended, the Pact Publishing book, is very good. It has a lot of examples. Otherwise, if you're looking for generic SQL, it's just Google. There's W3 Schools that you can use for pretty much any technical topic that you can imagine. And there's also Udemy for online courses on, again, any topic, technical and not.
Excellent. And finally, Ludwig also asks, can you query on tables hosted in your server but outside of SAP scope?
Yes, you can, as long as you make sure that the user that SAP runs under, so in a HANA installation, there's one user that SAP runs under. Just like in SQL as well, you can create a dedicated user or you can use the built-in SA or system account. As long as that user has access to those other schemas or databases, then you can definitely query out of them. We mentioned earlier that we typically create a separate schema that's outside of the Business One context, and then from there we create views to reach out across all the databases.
Excellent. Those are all the questions and all the time. It's 20 minutes past the hour. Thank you, Richard, very much. As we mentioned, we will be sending the recording of this webinar. Until next month, my name is Mauricio Castrillon, and on behalf of Richard Calvo and the entire team of Consensus International, have a wonderful year, everyone. Bye.